Hi, this is Starkey Sower. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. Today's topic is cooking with unusual foods, and this is part one. So we've been talking a lot about foods lately, and lots of all sorts of maybe weird foods to a lot of you guys. We talked about yogurts, which isn't so weird, but kefir might be really weird. And then we also talked about kombucha tea, and that might be really weird for a lot of you guys. But ultimately, when you go to the grocery store, you're seeing this food everywhere. Well, a couple other unique foods we're going to talk about in this series. First of all, we're going to talk about bone broth soup. Think about bone broth soup. A lot of people have been talking about it. A lot of people have been hearing about it. If you haven't heard about it, well, you're definitely not new to this one. A lot of people haven't. So this is going to be kind of fun and unusual. All right, so when we look at bone broth soup, ultimately, what is it? It is literally what we call the juice of the new millennia, right? So when we look at that, juicing back in the 90s was really big. Everyone got into it, television commercials and all that sort of stuff. Well, bone broth is today the new juice, so to speak, and that's the word on the streets. All right, so with that said, when we look at it, what is bone broth? Well, obviously it is bones. It also has tendons, maybe ligaments, broken bones actually added to the soup. And so ultimately it has a great sense of health to it. It actually is great for intestinal digestive situations, great for joints, great for bones, also for tendons and ligaments. So we're going to look at it throughout this series and kind of like maybe explore a little bit about bone broth. All right, so when we look at the foundations of bone broth, we have a couple different things that come up. First of all, the Chinese win, no question about it. They've been using it for thousands of years in what we call Chinese medical systems and Chinese food cures. One thing about the broken bone soup that they called it longevity soup. It's been not only a traditional food that's basically been consumed, but also used for different things such as like aging and longevity. All right. So another thing that's basically making it so much more popular is what we call the GAPS diet. So the GAPS diet was really big back in like the 50s and 60s with alternative practitioners, if there was that many of them in that particular time. And the GAPS diet is known as gut-associated psychological syndrome diet. And so ultimately what it's designed for is individuals that had what was called psychological problems from food sensitivities. Believe it or not, there's certain incidences where people that have food sensitivities actually exhibit schizophrenic type situations, especially to things such as gluten. So what a lot of these doctors were doing in the original research is they were saying, look, here's the deal. Let's kind of look and see what's going on with these food sensitivities and these food allergies. And ultimately, they termed what is known as leaky gut. It seems like nowadays people talk about leaky gut all the time. Well, way back in the day, they were talking about, and they actually came up with a diet specifically to kind of heal up the intestinal system to prevent food allergies from developing. And that was called the GAPS diet. All right, so in that situation, what happened was they used bone broth as the foundation for actually healing the digestive system along with lacto-fermented foods, which we're going to get into part two. All right, so then the guy that kind of popularized it was Dr. Josh Axe. And so he kind of brought it out. And a lot of people also with autism and autism kids were actually using the GAPS diet and talking about using it for health benefits and preventing like food sensitivities and these psychological disorders from these foods that typically are commonly allergens, such as soy, as well as wheat and gluten and things of that nature. All right. So when we look at it, we're going to see that as the foundation, the reason why it's become so popular. And then we're going to look at some of the benefits. So looking at the benefits, we see a couple different things. Obviously, we're going to talk about digestive health. When it comes to digestive health, the bone broth soup actually helps to kind of like heal the intestinal membranes. As we were saying, that leaky gut syndrome is like when there's holes, so to speak, or permeable areas in the digestive system where foods that are undigested get into the bloodstream and they actually get kind of coined or maybe like DNA copied and say, hey, look, that's an allergen. So every time you eat that food, we're going to attack the intestinal system and create inflammation. So a lot of people that are doing anti-inflammatory type diets are using the bone broth as a foundation for anti-inflammatory. All right, next on the list, when we look at it, is the immune system. Obviously, when it comes to the immune system, bones are integral to the immune system. It makes what we call red blood cells and white blood cells from stem cells. So without the bone marrow, you don't have an immune system. So obviously, this particular bone broth soup is very nourishing for that. Longevity is another thing. When we think of longevity, the Chinese actually call this what is known as a gene tonic, and it actually is supposed to help the cells to be able to rejuvenate the cells at the DNA level. All right, then of course the skin, there's type 1, type 2, type 3 collagen that is in bone broth soup. So ultimately what happens is that becomes very rejuvenating for the skin as well. So then we look at the joints and we see it also has glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate, as well as glucosamine glycans, as well as hyaluronic acid and other different types of minerals that are so nutritive, so to speak, for the joints, making bone broth soup definitely the soup of choice for rejuvenation. So you might be thinking at this point, well, how do I make some? It sounds like great. I want to make some of this. All right. So we kind of put up a simple formula for it. It's very easy. First of all, you take bones. You can get oxtail or you can get different types of bone marrow, and you put it basically in a crock pot and let it simmer for no less than 18 hours. Lee Egan, which is one of our nutritional consultant managers in one of our stores, has been eating bone broth soup since she was 2 years old. She says you got to let it simmer for 48 hours. At least. So going with her suggestions, we'll go to the 48-hour limit, use a little bit of lemon juice, and on top of it, also using a little bit of vinegar to kind of help to pull those nutrients out, or maybe some acidic vegetables. And that actually makes the bone broth. A lot of people will take the bones away and then use the broth itself and kind of add other different vegetables, and voila, you've got bone broth soup. A lot of you guys might be thinking, you know what? I haven't got the time for that. Neither do I want to sit around and watch the water level going down and keep on adding water back to it. And you can use actually what we call some pods, and Lono Health actually produces a particular pod where you can just put it in your purse or put it in your pocket and take it with you. Some hot water, boom, you've got bone broth soup in an instant, as well as Dr. Axe himself actually has a particular line of bone broth protein where they actually make the bone broth, boil it down, has the protein, everything together, instantized, tastes actually pretty decent as well with a bunch of different flavors. So for those that you need the convenience, definitely we can look at using the supplemental form and being able to get the same benefits. All right, so that kind of wraps up the bone broth moment and kind of gets you up to speed with what's going on out there. Definitely the new juice of today. Bone broth protein is definitely worth trying. This is Starkey Sowers. Thanks again for watching another Plus Program training series.